A broken billionaire makes a shocking vow to marry the next woman who walks through the door, and she turns out to be a homeless stranger named Clara. What begins as a reckless dare spirals into a scandal that could destroy his empire, but what she does next changes everything. Love, betrayal, redemption, and a battle for legacy unfold in the most unexpected way. Who is Clara Jensen, and how did she go from invisible to unstoppable? Where are you watching from? Hit subscribe to follow more powerful, emotional stories that prove even the most shattered souls can rise. On a cold winter evening in Manhattan, the Avalon Tower glittered like a crown jewel, casting golden reflections across the icy sidewalks below. Inside its penthouse ballroom, the city's elite mingled under chandeliers that sparkled like constellations. Waiters glided between clinking champagne flutes and whispered conversations, and a string quartet played something elegant and forgettable. The air smelled of money, ambition, and too much perfume. It was a scene made for magazine covers, and for Ethan Monroe, it was just another night he couldn't wait to escape. At 45, Ethan was the man behind the skyline. Real estate mogul. Visionary. Forbes called him the Iron Visionary, and the press loved him for his story. The son of a ruthless developer who'd inherited an empire and expanded it tenfold. But if anyone had looked closely at him that night, swirling a glass of bourbon near the balcony, they'd see it. The fracture lines beneath the suit, the exhaustion behind the smile, the man quietly cracking under the weight of legacy. "You've got that look again," said Gavin Price, his longtime friend and legal advisor. "The kind that says you're thinking something dangerous." Ethan tilted his glass. "Do you ever wonder if any of this, means anything?" "Define this." Gavin gestured to the dazzling room, the skyline, the billion-dollar view. "All of it. The buildings, the headlines, the charity foundations named after people who never set foot in them. My father passed the company to me. His father passed it to him. But now, you have Nina," Gavin offered gently. Ethan's jaw tensed. "Nina is brilliant. But the board, the legacy, they want a male heir. They want tradition. They want bloodline mythology." "That's outdated and insulting," Gavin said, disgusted. "Tell that to my father's will," Ethan replied, voice low and bitter. "I don't just run a company, Gavin. I carry a curse." Gavin didn't answer. He knew the history. Ethan's father had been a tyrant, obsessed with legacy and appearances. He'd built the Monroe fortune on grit and fear, and he'd codified that mindset into every clause of his will. Ethan had once vowed to break that cycle, but over time the system had bent him too. Ethan downed his drink and set it on the table. "I'm tired of waiting for the universe to solve my inheritance problem, so I'm making it solve itself." Gavin narrowed his eyes. "What the hell does that mean?" Ethan turned toward the entrance of the ballroom. "The next woman who walks through that door, I'm marrying her." Gavin coughed. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. I've tried logic. I've tried control. Now I want chaos." "That's not chaos, Ethan. That's insanity." But Ethan didn't flinch. His expression was eerily calm, like a man who had already decided the rules no longer applied to him. Let fate take the wheel. As Gavin started to protest, the crowd shifted. The doors at the far end of the room opened with a soft chime, and the laughter slowly died. Every head turned. She didn't belong there. The woman who stepped inside was a contradiction to everything that ballroom represented. Her coat was worn and too thin for the weather. Her jeans were faded, the knees torn not by design but time. Her boots were scuffed. Her hair was dark, unbrushed, falling in tangled waves around a face that looked too young to carry such exhaustion. And yet, there was something defiant in her eyes. As if life had tried to break her and failed just barely. The staff started moving, the reflex of trained luxury. Remove what doesn't belong. "Wait," Ethan said, voice firm but calm. It echoed across the ballroom like a bell. The servers froze. Gavin's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "You invited her?" he hissed. Ethan was already walking. Clara Jensen didn't know where she was. She had only entered the building to escape the wind, following a crowd of glittering people through an open door. She hadn't meant to interrupt anything. Her hands gripped the straps of her torn backpack like armor. Then he was there. A man in a tuxedo that probably cost more than she had made in her life. His hair was silver at the temples, his eyes sharp, but there was a warmth there too. Something unexpected. "I'm Ethan Monroe," he said like it mattered. Would you care to join me for dinner? She stared at him. What? I'm serious. She glanced around. Security was hovering. People were staring. She'd learned the rules of invisibility. Never draw attention, never make noise, never enter spaces meant for people with polished shoes and white teeth. But this man was looking at her like she belonged, like this was normal. My name is Clara, she said finally, voice rough from cold and exhaustion. Clara, he repeated, almost reverently. A beautiful name. She hesitated. Then slowly she took his outstretched hand. It was warm, real. Behind them, Gavin muttered to no one in particular, "This is either genius or the end of everything." Across town, in a quiet brownstone on the Upper West Side, Vanessa Monroe sipped her tea and scrolled through her phone. The headline made her blink. Ethan Monroe makes scene with unknown woman at Avalon Gala. She set the cup down. Oh God. What did you do now, Ethan? Back at Ethan's penthouse, Clara sat rigid on a leather couch that cost more than the trailer she used to live in. The walls were lined with modern art, the kind that looked like accidents and sold for millions. Why am I here? She asked finally. What do you want from me? Ethan leaned forward, elbows on knees. You. Excuse me? I want to marry you. She stood so fast she nearly knocked over the coffee table. What kind of twisted joke is this? You bring in some charity case for entertainment? It's not a joke. You don't even know me. Maybe I'd like to. She shook her head, backing toward the door. This is insane. It probably is, he said softly. But when you walked through that door, something in me said this is the beginning, not the end. She paused. The words didn't sound rehearsed, didn't even sound smooth. They sounded sad, desperate maybe, or lonely. I'm not someone you fix, Ethan, she said quietly. And I don't need your pity. He smiled, just a little. Good, because I don't pity you, I envy you. She blinked. What? You still have your soul. She didn't know what to say to that. He didn't push. I know this is fast. I'm not asking for a wedding tomorrow. I just want to know you. Let me give you a place to stay. No pressure, no cameras, just safety, time. She looked around again. The warmth of the room hadn't reached her bones yet. It felt borrowed, temporary. Still, I want my own place, she said finally. Not this palace. Ethan nodded. Done. And so it began, the strangest week of her life. He moved her into a modest but beautiful apartment in Brooklyn, near Prospect Park. Cozy, clean, unassuming. She was given clothes, simple things, not designer, and told she could come and go as she pleased. A quiet social worker checked in once a day. No reporters, no demands, just a strange, hovering tension that felt like possibility wrapped in fog. Clara didn't trust it. She didn't trust him. She spent her days wandering the park, her evenings curled up on a worn couch with library books. And every night she waited for the mask to fall, for Ethan Monroe to reveal his real plan. It didn't come. Instead, every morning, a note arrived at her door. A question, handwritten. What's your favorite movie? What's one thing you wish someone had said to you when you were 10? What scares you the most? She never answered, but she kept every note. One morning, while looking for a charger in a drawer, she found something, a photograph. An old construction site, men in hard hats, and among them, her brother. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't spoken his name in years. She stared at the photo, at Ethan's signature scribbled on the back, and suddenly the puzzle shifted. What if fate didn't bring her into his world? What if fate was bringing her back to the truth she never wanted to face? And what if Ethan Monroe was more than a man with a strange vow? What if he was the man tied to the darkest chapter of her past? The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Clara Jensen sat curled in the corner of a gray corduroy couch, her legs tucked beneath her, a steaming mug of tea cradled between both hands. The Brooklyn apartment Ethan had moved her into was tasteful, minimal, filled with light and soft textures, just enough to feel safe, not enough to feel permanent. That, she suspected, was intentional. Clara appreciated the space, the comfort, even the brand-new toothbrush waiting in the bathroom. But it all hummed with a strange tension, like a hotel suite rented for a secret meeting. Nothing felt like it was truly hers. Outside the frostbitten windows, the sun dipped lower behind the bare branches of Prospect Park. Her gaze lingered on the shadow of a boy walking a dog, bundled in puffy layers. It looked like a normal life, warm, uninterrupted, secure, the kind of life she used to daydream about on freezing benches with cracked lips and empty pockets. A soft knock came at the door. She tensed instinctively, setting her tea down with careful hands. It wasn't fear, not exactly. More the muscle memory of someone who had learned long ago that unexpected visits usually meant trouble. When she opened the door, Ethan Monroe stood there with a white paper bag in one hand and a slight, disarming smile on his face. "I brought soup," he said. "It's from this tiny place in Harlem. You'll never go back to canned again." She blinked at him. "You tracked down soup?" "I Googled best soup in New York and took it personally," he said with a small shrug. She stepped aside silently, letting him in. He didn't comment on the mess. Books scattered across the rug, 2 notebooks open and filled with scribbles, her shoes tossed carelessly by the door. Instead, he moved to the kitchen like he'd done it 100 times, unpacked the soup, and filled 2 bowls with a practiced ease that felt almost domestic. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked finally, her arms folded as she leaned against the counter. "Why me?" He paused, ladle in midair. "Because I made a vow." "Right," she said, her tone sharp. "To fate. Or chance. Or maybe just your boredom." Ethan set the ladle down, then leaned against the opposite counter. "I know how it sounds. And I know what people are saying, that I've lost it, that this is a scandal in the making, that I'm desperate. And are you?" He didn't blink. "Yes, but not the way they think." She wasn't ready for the honesty in his voice. It cracked through her armor more than flattery or gifts ever could. "I've lived my whole life in control," he continued. "Every decision calculated, every risk measured. I built everything to keep chaos out, but it didn't work. I still ended up alone. I still ended up," he paused, "disconnected. From people, from myself, from anything real." Clara narrowed her eyes. "And now you think I'm real?" "You walked into that ballroom like a question I didn't know I'd been asking for years," he said. She wanted to scoff, but something in her throat caught. He was too good at this, too articulate, too smooth. And yet there was a tremble beneath the surface, like a man tiptoeing across the edge of a cliff. "Fine," she said. "Then I want answers. All of them. Starting with this." She marched across the room, opened a drawer in the hallway table, and pulled out the photo. The old construction crew, the dusty smiles, and there, third from the left, her brother. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. "Where did you find that?" "In your drawer," she said flatly. "Why do you have a photo of my brother?" Ethan stepped closer, studying the image. His fingers hovered above it, hesitant. "That site was one of my father's old projects, before he handed the company over. I kept some photos from those years because they reminded me where we came from." "He died on that site," Clara said coldly. "They said it was an accident, but the payout never came. No funeral support, just silence." Ethan blinked, clearly rattled. "I didn't know. You didn't want to know. That's not fair," he snapped, then softened. "I was in college when that project happened. I wasn't part of the company yet." Clara stared at him. "But you are now, and you inherited everything that buried my brother, literally." Silence filled the space between them. The soup on the stove had begun to boil gently, a soft bubbling that sounded eerily like tension rising. "I can't undo what happened," Ethan said, voice low, "but I can face it, with you, if you'll let me." Clara turned away, her jaw tight. "I don't know what you want from me, Ethan. Some redemption story? A woman from the ashes who makes your heart beat again?" "No," he said quietly. "I want to be someone who listens, and if there's pain I'm part of, I want to understand it, not erase it." His words surprised her. Not because they were romantic, but because they were raw. Later that night, after he left, Clara sat at the window and stared out at the sleeping city. She thought about her brother, how he used to bring home greasy Chinese takeout and play Nirvana on his guitar until she threatened to throw it out the window. He'd wanted more for her. She hadn't gotten it. Not until now. But at what cost? The next morning, she received another note. This one read, "If you could relive one moment from your life without changing it, what would it be?" She didn't answer, but for the first time, she smiled. Across the city, Gavin sat at a large oak desk, flipping through a file marked confidential. The image of Clara and her brother appeared again, this time in an HR archive labeled Incident Review, Site 14. Ethan had asked him to look into it quietly. Gavin didn't like what he was finding. There were redacted memos, settlement delays, and signatures that didn't quite line up. He picked up his phone. "We might have a problem," he said when Ethan answered. "I know," Ethan replied. But I'm not walking away. In the days that followed, Clara and Ethan began meeting in quiet corners of the city, parks, diners, small bookstores. Not as lovers, not even as friends, as two people circling something too fragile to name. They talked about her favorite poems, about his regrets, about the night she nearly froze to death behind a laundromat, about the morning he realized his billion-dollar empire didn't fill the hole in his chest. One night, in a second-hand bookshop in Soho, Clara found a worn copy of The Little Prince. She held it up. "My brother used to read this to me," she murmured. "He said, 'Grown-ups forget what matters.'" Ethan watched her closely. "Do you think I've forgotten?" "I think you're trying to remember." And that, perhaps, was the first real truth between them. But not everyone saw the story that way. Across town, a man in a tailored charcoal suit leaned back in a leather chair. He stared at a security feed paused on Clara walking into Ethan's building. "She's dangerous," he muttered. "Or useful." He reached for a burner phone and dialed. "Tell the board," he said. "It's time we remind Ethan Monroe that legacies aren't built on sentiment, and that woman, she's the crack in the armor. Exploit it." That night, Clara sat alone in her apartment. The heater rattled softly, and a lamp bathed the room in golden light. Her phone buzzed once. A private number. She stared at the message. "You think you're helping him, but you don't know the truth. He's not saving you. He's setting you up." She stared at it for a long time, then slowly powered off her phone. Outside, snow had begun to fall in gentle spiraling flakes. Inside, something even more dangerous was taking root. Trust. And trust, she knew, could either be a lifeline or a loaded gun. 3 days passed without a word from Ethan. Clara told herself she didn't care. She told herself it was better this way. Safer. The space gave her time to think, to breathe, to figure out what exactly she had stepped into. But as she sipped burnt coffee in a corner booth at Luna's diner, an old haunt from before her life fell apart, she couldn't ignore the flicker of something else. Disappointment. She traced the rim of her mug with one finger, staring at the steam rising like ghosts. The text message she'd received still haunted her. She hadn't responded. She hadn't shown it to Ethan, but it was like a splinter beneath the skin, irritating, invisible, impossible to forget. Clara flipped through her brother's worn journal, one of the only things she'd salvaged from the storage unit before they auctioned it off. The pages were messy, filled with math, sketches, and shorthand entries from his job on the Monroe construction site. One entry stopped her cold. Site 14 supervisor cut corners again. Safety team's gone quiet. If anything happens, I hope someone reads this. Clara stared at the page so long the letters blurred. Her brother, Leo, hadn't died from a freak accident. Not really. He'd died in a system built on silence and denial. She needed to know more. The next morning, Clara walked into the Monroe Corporation's downtown tower with borrowed confidence and a forged visitor badge, courtesy of a friend who owed her more than one favor. She made her way past the polished marble lobby and into the archives department on the 12th floor. The office was hushed, lined with metal cabinets and humming scanners. The clerk barely looked up when Clara asked for incident reports from Site 14, dated 8 years ago. She was handed a thin, redacted file. The language was cold. Unanticipated structural failure. Compensation process delayed due to pending legal review. No evidence of equipment malfunction. But something didn't add up. She flipped to the witness statement page. The signature field was blank. Clara's breath caught. If there were no signatures, then there were no testimonies. No accountability. Just disappearance. She stuffed her phone into her coat and left, her boots echoing against the floor. Outside, the wind bit harder than she remembered. She headed downtown, her hands stuffed in her pockets, thinking about how her brother's voice had slowly faded from memory, replaced by the silence of legal documents and the chill of unanswered questions. She didn't know what Ethan knew. Maybe nothing, maybe everything, but she intended to find out. That night, Ethan finally called. "I owe you an explanation," he said without preamble. His voice sounded tight, like someone walking a high wire without a net. "Which part?" she replied, her voice calm but flat. "The part where you brought me into your life as a dare, or the part where your company buried what happened to my brother?" "I didn't know about Leo," he said, "not until Gavin started digging this week. And I swear to you, I didn't bring you here for a show. Not once I met you." She didn't reply immediately. Then, come to the diner tomorrow, 10 a.m. Don't bring your driver, and no tailored suit. He chuckled softly. Got it. The next morning, Ethan arrived wearing jeans and a navy sweatshirt, clearly borrowed or decades old. He looked almost human. Less Wall Street, more Saturday morning. Clara watched him walk in, then gestured to the seat across from her. Coffee? She asked. Desperately. They sat in silence for a few minutes, steam rising from mismatched mugs. Finally, Clara reached into her bag and placed Leo's journal on the table. Ethan looked down at it like it was a bomb. He wrote about Site 14, she said. About things being unsafe, about warnings that were ignored. I read the report, Ethan said quietly. It was all sterilized, and when I asked Gavin to trace who oversaw the legal review, he found something strange. What? The lawyer who handled the internal investigation was my uncle. Clara's eyes widened. So it was buried on purpose. It looks that way. So now what? She asked, challenging him. You give me hush money? Set up a scholarship in his name and call it justice? No, he said, meeting her eyes. I'm not here to buy my way out. I'm here because I want to help you bring it all to light, even if it means burning parts of this company down. Clara blinked. She hadn't expected that. You'd destroy your own legacy? He smiled faintly. Maybe it's time I build a different one. That night, Clara lay awake in her apartment, her mind buzzing. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was fighting alone, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on a fault line. One shift, and everything would crack. The next afternoon, Vanessa Monroe appeared at her door. Clara opened it to find the woman she'd only seen in tabloids. Elegant, distant, immaculately put together. Vanessa wore a beige coat, high boots, and a tired expression. Can I come in? She asked. Clara hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat in the living room. Clara offered tea. Vanessa declined. The silence between them stretched like glass. I'm not here to threaten you, Vanessa said. I don't hate you, I just want to understand. Clara folded her arms. Understand what? What he sees in you, Vanessa said. Why he looks at you like you matter more than anything else. I haven't seen that spark in him since before Nina was born. Clara didn't know what to say. I came here to warn you, Vanessa admitted. But I think what I really needed was to look you in the eyes and decide whether I should be worried. For him, for our daughter, for everything he's about to put at risk. I didn't ask for this, Clara said. I know. That's the part that scares me. Because sometimes, the ones who don't ask are the ones who stay. Vanessa stood, brushed invisible lint from her sleeve, and paused at the door. Just don't let him forget who he is, she said. And don't forget who you are either. Nina's watching, and so am I. Clara nodded, heart thudding. That evening, she walked alone to the Brooklyn Bridge, Leo's journal in her pocket, and watched the sun bleed orange over the skyline. It was beautiful and brutal all at once. She thought about Ethan's voice, about Vanessa's warning, about the walls she'd built so carefully around her soul. And for the first time, she wondered what it would feel like to lower them. The next morning, she knocked on Ethan's office door at the Monroe building. He was on a call, but when he saw her face, he hung up immediately. What's wrong? She stepped inside slowly, her voice soft. Your ex-wife came to see me. Ethan frowned. Vanessa? She wasn't angry, Clara said. She was heartbroken. He ran a hand down his face. I never meant for this to hurt her, or Nina. I know, Clara said, but this, whatever it is between us, it's not just about you and me anymore. You have a daughter, a legacy, a story I've crashed into without warning. He stepped closer, voice low. You're not crashing, you're changing everything. Her voice trembled. I don't know if I can. I've spent years surviving, not living, and now you want me to step into this glass world and pretend I belong? I don't want you to pretend, he said. I want you to be exactly who you are. For a moment, she believed him. But just beyond the frosted glass wall of the office, Vanessa stood watching. And she wasn't the only one. Across the city, in a leather chair behind a mahogany desk, a man clicked a pen against his thumb and watched the news scroll across his monitor. Ethan Monroe, Clara Jensen. Financial headlines, legal speculation. The man leaned forward, picked up the phone, and said just 3 words. Activate the plan. The rain came unexpectedly that morning, thick drops splashing against Manhattan's windows like a warning. Clara sat by the cafe window with her jacket still damp, watching people duck under awnings and taxis blur past. It should have been just another gray Tuesday. But something in her gut twisted. A familiar tightness. A shift in the air she couldn't name. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. A familiar voice filled her ear, but it wasn't Ethan's. "Miss Jensen? This is Michelle Garvey from the Sentinel. I'd love a quick comment about your relationship with Mr. Monroe, particularly the alleged use of company funds for your housing and wardrobe." Clara froze. "What?" "We've confirmed through a company source that Monroe Corporation board members are holding an emergency meeting to address potential misappropriation. Some believe your relationship may violate internal ethics clauses. Anything you'd like to say on the record?" Clara hung up without a word. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through the notifications, lighting up her phone like wildfire. Breaking. Billionaire's mystery girlfriend sparks financial scandal, boardroom showdown. Expected at Monroe Corp. From park bench to penthouse, the truth about Clara Jensen. She felt the cafe walls tighten around her, her breath shallow. She grabbed her coat, nearly knocking over her untouched tea, and stepped outside into the rain, the cold slapping her skin awake. Across the city, in the Monroe Building's top-floor office, Ethan stared at the same headlines. Daniel's voice was tight through the speakerphone. "They're calling it a coup, Ethan. Financial records were leaked, selectively, but just enough to imply you used company funds for personal gain. Grace's apartment, the clothes, the opera night, it's all being reframed as a romantic experiment gone rogue. They're painting her as a gold digger." "I paid for everything myself," Ethan snapped. "I know," Daniel said. "But optics don't care about receipts. They care about stories. And right now, yours is looking dangerous." Ethan's jaw locked. He turned away from the screen, eyes landing on the framed photo of Nina at her college graduation. Everything he'd done to protect the company, sacrificing relationships, missing birthdays, becoming the man his father trained him to be, it was all unraveling. And for the first time, he didn't care about the board's legacy. He only cared about her. Clara. He grabbed his coat. When he arrived at her apartment, the door swung open before he even knocked. Her eyes were puffy, her phone still clutched in her hand. "I didn't leak anything," she said immediately. "I know you didn't. I don't even talk to reporters." "Clara, they're calling me a scam artist," she said, voice cracking, "that I tricked you into falling for me so I could steal your empire." Ethan stepped inside and pulled the door shut behind him. "You don't have to defend yourself to me. I'm the one they're really after." She turned away, pacing, her fingers digging into her sleeves. "I told you this was a mistake. I warned you. I didn't belong in your world." "You were never the mistake," he said gently. "But maybe I was naive to think I could change that world so easily." She looked at him, and the sorrow in her eyes made something fracture inside him. "So what happens now?" she asked. "They're demanding a board meeting. Noon. Full vote. They want my resignation." Clara's breath caught. "You're stepping down?" "I built this company on risk," he said, "and I knew falling for you would cost me. I just didn't realize how fast they'd move." Clara shook her head. "I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. You're the only reason I see what's worth keeping." He reached for her hand. She let him hold it. Outside, the storm hadn't stopped. Vanessa Monroe stood at the edge of Prospect Park, staring at the Monroe Building's silhouette in the distance. Her phone buzzed. She didn't answer. She knew what it was. Updates, legal memos, gossip, all circling the name Clara Jensen. But Vanessa wasn't thinking about the headlines. She was thinking about her daughter. Nina had been quiet through all of this, eyes glued to the screen, absorbing every word written about her father. Vanessa knew this moment would leave a mark, one way or another. What Ethan did next would shape not only his legacy, but their daughter's understanding of who he truly was. She made a decision. An hour later, Vanessa entered a small cafe tucked into Lakeview. Clara looked up as the bell chimed, tension already rising in her shoulders. "I figured you'd be here," Vanessa said, removing her coat. Clara stood. "If you're here to do what?" Vanessa asked, setting her purse down calmly. "Lecture you? Threaten you? Tell you to run?" Clara hesitated. Vanessa sat across from her, her eyes sharp and clear, held no venom. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I'm here because I've watched Ethan make every mistake a man like him can make, but I've never seen him fight for someone the way he fights for you." Clara didn't speak. Vanessa continued. And I know, he's never needed help more than he does now. So I came to say, don't leave. Clara blinked. Why? Because you're not the one bringing him down. You're the one giving him a reason to stand up. Across the city, in the Monroe boardroom, the walls were covered with projections, headlines, and financial charts. Suits whispered. The air was thick with smugness. Ethan entered at 11:59 a.m. He looked tired but steady. His tie was loose, his sleeves rolled. He stood at the head of the long table, facing the very men and women who once toasted his tenacity. I didn't misuse company funds, he began. Every dollar spent on Clara came from my personal accounts. Not a cent touched the corporation. A board member leaned forward. You brought chaos into this company. No, Ethan said. I brought humanity. Maybe you've forgotten, but this company was built on risk, on courage. My father didn't play it safe, and neither did I. Another voice interjected, dismissive. You've made a mockery of our name. I am the name, Ethan shot back. And I will not apologize for choosing to love someone you deem unworthy. Just then the doors opened. Gasps rippled through the room. Clara walked in. Her jeans were clean but simple, her jacket modest. She walked with the kind of grace that can't be bought, only earned, and behind her eyes burned fire. I know I wasn't invited, she said, but I need to speak. One of the members protested, but Ethan raised a hand. She's staying. Clara stepped forward. I don't want Ethan's money. I didn't come here looking for a savior. I didn't ask for this attention or this life. I've slept on sidewalks. I've been ignored. And I would rather go back to that life than stand here and let you crucify him for seeing value in someone like me. Silence. Clara turned to Ethan. You didn't save me. You believed in me. And that was enough. An older board member leaned forward. If you're not after money or fame, why are you still here? She looked at Ethan. Her voice softened. Because I love him. The silence cracked like glass, and because for the first time in my life, she added, someone believed I was enough, not perfect, not pedigree, just enough. That was the moment the tide turned. The board voted, narrowly, to retain Ethan's position, but under one condition: he must step back from daily operations and appoint a co-director. Without hesitation, Ethan said, I choose my daughter, Nina Monroe. The room erupted in murmurs. 3 months later, in a quiet ceremony beneath the golden trees of Lincoln Park, Ethan and Clara exchanged vows. No press, no headlines, just the people who mattered. Vanessa stood beside Nina, who wore a pale blue dress and held the rings in her palm. Afterward, as guests laughed and drank cider from paper cups, Clara sat beside Ethan on a wooden bench, her fingers laced through his. I still can't believe this happened, she whispered. Neither can I, he said. But I'd go through all of it again if it meant finding you at the end. And as the wind rustled the leaves around them, Clara finally felt something deeper than survival. She felt home. It started with silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, suffocating stillness of someone missing. Clara hadn't seen Ethan in 2 days, not since the board meeting. He hadn't answered her texts, and Daniel only responded with vague messages. He's handling internal matters. That phrase felt sterile, evasive. Clara knew something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. That instinct, the one that kept her alive on the streets, was now screaming. She didn't wait for permission. Clara made her way to the Monroe building early in the morning, wearing her usual coat and worn boots. Security recognized her but hesitated. The whispers about her hadn't died down. If anything, the tension around her presence had grown thicker, like oil on water. She pressed the elevator button and rode up alone, her reflection fractured by polished chrome. On the 36th floor, the office floor was quiet, too quiet. Ethan's glass-walled corner office stood empty, blinds drawn. Daniel's assistant gave her a nervous smile but offered nothing. Clara's hand hovered near the doorknob, heart thumping. Then she turned and walked away. Not out of fear, but because something told her she wasn't the one Ethan needed right now. Instead, she returned to her apartment and waited. Hours passed. The sky dimmed. Headlines buzzed louder with each refresh on her phone. Whispers of resignation. Is Monroe out for good? Clara Jensen remained silent amid fallout. Inside the scandal that shook Manhattan's crown prince. Then her phone rang. A single word appeared on the screen. Vanessa. Clara answered without hesitation. Have you seen him? Vanessa asked, her voice unusually soft. No. I think he's shutting down. Clara stood. I'm going to find him. She knew where to look. The city stretched wide beneath the skyline, but Ethan Monroe was a creature of habit and heartbreak. There was one place he always went when he needed silence that didn't feel like punishment: the conservatory at the Met. She found him in the back garden, sitting alone on a wrought iron bench under a naked tree. His coat collar was turned up against the wind, hands stuffed into his pockets. He didn't look up when she approached, but he knew she was there. I thought you were gone, he said quietly. I was waiting. For what? For you to remember that none of this matters if you lose yourself. He turned slowly, his face lined with exhaustion. They're still coming after me. Some of the junior partners are trying to rally a second vote. They say Nina's appointment was nepotism, that I manipulated the board with emotion instead of logic. She sat beside him. That's what people say when they can't control a story anymore. They try to kill it. I spent my whole life building something bulletproof, he whispered, but it only took one woman walking through a door to make me realize I built a fortress around my own emptiness. Clara didn't respond. She just reached out and took his hand. It was cold. She didn't let go. I didn't expect you to stay, he admitted. I didn't expect to want to, she replied. They sat there for a long time. The city moved on around them. Cars, conversations, birds cutting through the sky. But in that garden, time stood still. Eventually, Ethan turned to her. I want to show you something. They left the conservatory together, taking a cab to a part of the city Clara hadn't visited in years. Lower East Side. Industrial, gray and rusted. The car stopped in front of an old, locked construction gate. This was Site 14, Ethan said, where your brother died. Clara swallowed. She hadn't expected the impact of seeing it with her own eyes. The fence was wrapped in faded caution tape, but the building was never finished, just scaffolding and silence. I had the files reopened, he said. Privately, Gavin helped. We're suing the subcontractor who ignored the safety report. My father knew. He buried it, but I'm not going to. Clara turned to him, stunned. You didn't have to do that. I did, he said simply. Because if I want to keep you, I have to start earning you. That night, Clara slept for the first time in 2 days. Deep sleep, no dreams, no ghosts. But the morning brought fresh fire. A knock on her apartment door jolted her awake. She opened it to find a delivery envelope sitting alone on the mat. No address, no sender. Inside was a tablet, preloaded with a single video file. She pressed play. It was surveillance footage, grainy but clear. Ethan walking into an unmarked office. A man's voice in the background. Familiar, smug. You think you can rewrite the rules, Ethan? Replace bloodline with emotion? Let your daughter run the company because of some sob story and your affair with a woman off the streets? Ethan's voice, calm but firm. This conversation is over. The other man laughed. Oh no, Ethan, it's just beginning. We'll see how long you last once the board sees this. The video ended. Clara stared at the screen. Her blood ran cold. She recognized the voice. Harrison Laird, Ethan's cousin, senior partner, board member. She called Daniel immediately. He answered on the first ring. I was just about to call you. We've got a problem, she said. I know, he replied grimly. The second board vote has been scheduled, tomorrow morning, and they're coming for blood this time. We need to get ahead of this, Clara said. We need to show them who Harrison really is. You have proof? She sent the video. I'll take care of it, Daniel said. But you might want to talk to Ethan before this explodes. He's not as strong as he pretends. She found Ethan in the same place as before, his penthouse, still too big, too sterile. He was standing by the window, staring down at the glittering lights of the city, his glass untouched in his hand. I know who's behind it, she said as she entered. He turned. It's Harrison, she continued. He recorded you. He's been planning this from the beginning. Ethan's shoulders tensed. Of course it's him. We're going to fight back. He looked at her, something new in his eyes. Not fear, not resignation. Hope. I can't lose you, Clara. Then don't. She stepped closer. You've been running from ghosts your whole life, Ethan. Your father's, your own. But this is where you stop. He touched her cheek. Will you be there tomorrow? With you? She asked. Always. They didn't sleep that night. Instead, they worked with Daniel, crafting statements, prepping documents, gathering everything they could to blow Harrison's scheme open. Clara, for the first time, felt something rise in her that she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not just survival. A real reason to stand. At dawn, she put on the only formal dress she owned, a simple navy piece gifted to her weeks ago but never worn. Ethan adjusted her necklace, his fingers brushing the hollow of her throat. "You're radiant," he murmured. "I'm furious," she corrected. He smiled. Even better. When they entered the boardroom, all eyes turned. Suits, phones, cameras flashing from behind tinted glass. The tension was a living thing. Clara stood behind Ethan, steady and unmoving. Harrison smirked from the far end of the table. "Let's begin," he said, eyes sharp. "We're here today to determine whether Mr. Monroe's recent actions, including the appointment of his daughter as co-director and the personal relationship with Ms. Jensen, constitute grounds for termination." Ethan didn't flinch. "Before we begin, there's something you should all see." Daniel stepped forward, playing the video. Gasps, whispers. When it ended, silence fell like ash. "This," Ethan said, voice unwavering, "is the man who accused me of manipulating the company for personal gain. The same man who planned a coup using surveillance, threats, and illegal recordings." Harrison stood, red-faced. "This is absurd." "Save it," Daniel cut in. "We've already initiated legal proceedings. The board has two options: continue down a path of rot or rise." The vote was called. Ethan stayed, Harrison was removed, and Clara Jensen, the woman who had once walked into a ballroom by accident, was no longer a liability. She was the fire that burned corruption to the ground. The city moved like it always did. Steel, noise, lights that never truly slept. But somewhere between the push of traffic and the hum of late-night diners, something had shifted. It had been 2 weeks since the boardroom reckoning. 2 weeks since Harrison Laird had been removed, exposed for orchestrating a calculated campaign of sabotage. Ethan kept his position on the board, narrowly, but had stepped away from day-to-day operations, appointing Nina as co-director alongside a seasoned executive. The press exploded with headlines, and Clara's name finally disappeared from the tabloids. For once, she wasn't being hunted by scandal, but by silence. A strange thing happens when the war ends. You're left with the echo of everything it cost. Clara stood on the fire escape of the brownstone Ethan had moved into after resigning from the penthouse. Their new place was modest, grounded. The kind of home that didn't hum with money, but with breath and warmth and imperfections. She stared down at the street below, cigarette smoke curling in the cold air from someone 2 floors beneath her. She didn't smoke, but she watched the smoke like it carried her thoughts away. Behind her, the faint sound of Nina's laughter drifted through the open kitchen window. They were making pasta. Ethan had insisted on cooking tonight, though Clara was pretty sure he couldn't boil water without burning it. Nina had dropped by to share her progress at the company. How she'd handled her first solo investor meeting, how she'd rewritten 3 outdated legacy policies without asking permission. "She's you know," Clara had told Ethan earlier that day. "No," he'd replied with a half-smile. "She's better." The door creaked behind her now. Ethan stepped onto the fire escape, 2 mugs in hand. "Chamomile," he said. "Doctor's orders." She accepted the mug. Their fingers brushed, lingered. "I still think we should have sued the entire board," she muttered. "We did the hard part," Ethan replied. "We stayed." Clara took a sip. "Staying is harder than running. I should know." They stood in silence, their shoulders touching. Then she spoke without looking at him. "I want to go back." He turned. "Back where?" "Site 14. Ethan blinked. "Why?" "To say goodbye." He didn't ask to whom, he already knew. The next morning, they drove in silence. A quiet 2-hour trip north, past the towers of the city into the ghost-gray bones of the industrial zones. The car wound through streets Clara hadn't walked in nearly a decade. Memories flickered in passing windows. The smell of cold metal. The way her brother used to whistle in elevators. The way he'd call her kid, even though she was only 3 years younger. Site 14 was gated and condemned. The company had never resumed construction. The steel skeleton of the building still loomed, rusted now, with vines curling like veins around forgotten scaffolding. Ethan unlocked the temporary gate, and they walked in slowly, the gravel crunching under their boots. Clara stood still in the center of the empty lot. A few remnants remained: bent rebar, weather-stained tarps, a cracked safety sign that read, "Monroe Construction, Progress in Motion." I used to picture him trapped under all of this, she said softly. And I hated you for it, even before I knew who you were. Ethan didn't respond. He let the words breathe. Clara walked forward, knelt down near the center, and reached into her coat. She pulled out a worn photo, her and Leo in front of a Christmas tree, grinning like they had secrets no one else understood. She placed it on the gravel, pinned beneath a smooth stone. No one ever apologized, she whispered. Not the company, not the lawyers, not the men who knew and looked away. Ethan crouched beside her. I can't fix what they did. I don't want it fixed, she said. I just want someone to remember. He looked at her. I will. They stayed there a while, the wind whistling through the skeletal beams above. Later, they returned to the city. Clara didn't cry, but something heavy lifted off her ribs that day, something that had been sitting there for years. That night, Ethan made tea. She watched him from the kitchen doorway, barefoot in sweatpants, humming an off-key tune under his breath. It was absurd and perfect. Hey, she said, voice soft. He turned. I'm not leaving. He smiled. I know. 2 weeks passed, then 3. They found their rhythm, shared morning walks, whispered conversations in bed about things they never thought they'd say aloud. Clara volunteered at a nearby women's shelter, helping women transition out of homelessness. She didn't tell them her full story, but they knew. They saw it in her eyes, in the way she listened. One morning, Ethan came home with a folder in his hand and a wild look in his eyes. What is it? Clara asked, drying her hands on a towel. A proposal. She raised an eyebrow. I want to start a non-profit, he said, in Leo's name. In yours. The Grace Initiative was your idea. But let's make it real. What would it do? Job training, transitional housing, financial literacy, all the things the system forgets. Clara stared at him. You're serious. I'm tired of building towers, he said. I want to build people. They started that afternoon. By summer, the Grace Initiative had its first building, a converted church with warm lights and long tables. Ethan taught a finance workshop once a week. Clara managed the intake program. Nina donated furniture. Vanessa sent a check and a note. You didn't just change Ethan, you changed all of us. The press eventually found them again, but this time, the story was different. From legacy to redemption, the new chapter of Ethan Monroe and Clara Jensen. The woman who changed a billionaire, and the system. Clara didn't read the articles. She was too busy helping a young woman named Tessa find an apartment. One night, weeks later, she came home late. Ethan was waiting on the balcony with a candle flickering beside him. I've been thinking, he said. That's dangerous, she replied with a smile. He pulled something from his pocket. It wasn't a ring. It was a key. To the house in Maine, he said. The one we talked about. I put in an offer. We got it. She stared at the key. I figured it could be our place to disappear. Clara took the key, her thumb brushing the ridges. You know I'm not good at forever, he smiled. Neither am I, so let's try right now. She kissed him. Soft, solid, certain. And in that moment, Clara knew she hadn't just survived, she had built something, with him, for herself, for every person like her who had ever been forgotten, erased, or called less than. And for once her story wasn't about the fall, it was about what rose after. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of cinnamon and wet leaves as it swept through the narrow streets of Wicker Park. Clara stood at the window of their brownstone, watching a line of neighborhood kids kick around a half-deflated soccer ball, their laughter echoing off the brick walls. It was a far cry from the life she had once known, the shelters, the silence, the constant search for safety. Here, in this quiet little pocket of Chicago, life had finally slowed down enough for her to breathe. Behind her, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, glasses perched on his nose, as he reviewed building permits for the Grace Initiative's second location. He looked comfortable in his worn flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, a mug of tea slowly cooling beside him. If someone had shown her this scene a year ago, she wouldn't have believed it. A former Wall Street titan helping convert a rundown rec center into a sanctuary for women, a woman who used to sleep on park benches, now in charge of shaping its future. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real. Messy, raw, and absolutely theirs. Are you sure we can afford a second site this soon? Clara asked, leaning against the counter. Ethan glanced up, a slow smile curving his lips. With your budgeting skills, we can afford a third. She rolled her eyes, but her smile betrayed her. He stood, walked over, and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Do you remember what I said the night I saw you at that restaurant?" "That you wanted to marry me," she replied, raising an eyebrow. "Well, yes," he chuckled. "But I also said I was tired of legacy, tired of control. And now you're opening buildings with my name on them. Quite the pivot." "It's not your name I care about," he whispered. "It's your story. It's what it means. That people like us can rise. That we matter." Clara didn't respond right away. Her throat tightened. No matter how many nights she spent wrapped in warmth now, some part of her still remembered the cold, the hunger, the way people looked through her like she was glass. But not him. He had seen her. Really seen her. A knock interrupted their quiet moment. Ethan pulled back, and Clara went to answer. She opened the door to find Nina standing there, cheeks flushed from the wind, a bakery bag in one hand and a stack of documents in the other. "Brought sugar," she said, "and spreadsheets." Clara stepped aside with a grin. "Come in before your face freezes." They settled around the table, sipping tea and flipping through projections for the new site. Nina, ever meticulous, outlined potential locations, zoning issues, and grant opportunities like she was pitching a billion-dollar investment. Clara admired her focus, how she moved with purpose now, no longer just her father's shadow, but a force of her own. "You're really good at this," Clara said, genuine. Nina's smile faltered for a second, then returned, softer. "Thanks. I think I finally found my lane." Clara nodded. She knew the feeling. When the noise fell away and something inside clicked into place. "By the way," Nina added, reaching into her coat pocket, "you might want to read this." She handed Clara a glossy envelope. Clara opened it cautiously and unfolded the crisp sheet inside. It was an invitation. "The New York Women's Foundation proudly invites you to our annual honoring gala. This year we celebrate Clara Jensen, co-founder of the Grace Initiative, for her outstanding contributions to transitional advocacy and women's empowerment." Clara stared at the words like they might vanish. Ethan reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "You deserve this." "I don't know if I'm ready," she said. "You're more than ready," Nina said. "You're the reason I believed I could step up too." Clara blinked hard, emotion rising like a tide. She set the invitation down and stood. "I need some air." She slipped outside, pulling her jacket close, the wind tangling her hair as she walked toward the small bench at the end of the block. It was the kind of bench where people left coffee cups and forgotten gloves. She sat down and let her hands settle in her lap. How had she gone from invisible to this? A year ago, she'd been running from shadows. Now she was being asked to stand in a spotlight, and part of her, the part that still flinched when someone said her name too loud, was terrified. She didn't notice the figure approaching until the bench creaked beside her. Vanessa Monroe. Clara stiffened, but Vanessa simply sat, her movements graceful as always. "I saw the news," she said after a moment, "about the gala." Clara nodded slowly. "I didn't ask for it." "No, but you earned it." Clara looked at her, surprised. Vanessa's eyes stayed on the street. "I used to think strength meant silence, control, never cracking, never yielding. But then I watched you walk into a boardroom full of people who wanted to break you, and you didn't flinch. That changed something in me." Clara didn't speak. Vanessa continued. "I'm not here to make amends. We've both said what needed to be said. But I wanted you to know, I'm proud of you." Those words, spoken from the woman who once had every reason to hate her, landed like a gift she didn't know she needed. "Thank you," Clara whispered. They sat together in silence. Two women who had once been on opposite sides of a storm, now watching the sky begin to clear. That night, Ethan found Clara in the living room, seated cross-legged on the rug, reading a stack of letters, testimonials from women who'd come through the Grace Initiative, stories of survival, resilience, rediscovery. Some were scrawled on notebook paper, others typed, all raw, all real. "You okay?" he asked softly. She looked up, tears glistening but unshed. "These women, they remind me of me." He knelt beside her. "And you remind them what's possible." She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his. "I'm scared." "I am too," he admitted. "But scared doesn't mean stop." A week later, they boarded a train to New York. Clara's first time returning since she'd left years ago, with nothing but a backpack and a heart full of wounds. She wore a second-hand black dress tailored to fit her just right. Her hair was swept into a simple bun, No diamonds, no velvet, just authenticity. When they stepped into the gala ballroom, the lights were warm and the music low. People turned to look, not in judgment, but in admiration. The host took the stage, listing her accomplishments, her journey, her bravery. Then came the call. Please welcome Clara Jensen. She walked up slowly, her heels clicked softly against the polished floor. At the podium, she paused, looked out at the faces, some familiar, most strangers, but they all waited, ready to hear her story. She cleared her throat. I'm not supposed to be here, she began. At least that's what the world told me. I was invisible once, forgotten, but someone saw me, and more importantly, I started seeing myself. She looked at Ethan, who stood at the edge of the crowd, his eyes never leaving hers. This isn't just my story. It belongs to every woman who thought she was too broken, too poor, too damaged to matter. I'm here because I survived, but I stayed because I chose to live. And now, I help others do the same. Applause thundered across the room. Later that night, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, Ethan slipped his hand into hers. You know, he said, this time last year, I was about to make the best decision of my life. She smiled. The dare? He nodded. And I'm glad I walked through that door, she said. So am I. They stood like that for a long while, the city breathing around them. Clara Jensen had once been a ghost. Now she was the storm that cleared the sky. The golden leaves of October danced along the cobblestone path in Lincoln Park, spinning like confetti in the wind. Clara stood at the edge of the clearing, her bare feet pressed into the soft earth beneath her simple white dress. Around her, small lanterns swayed gently from the branches, casting a warm glow over the intimate gathering. No news crews, no drones, no flashing lights, just friends, family, and the quiet rustle of nature, bearing witness. Ethan stood beneath a rustic arch wrapped in ivy and dried lavender, wearing a charcoal gray suit with his sleeves casually rolled. His eyes never left hers. He looked different now, softer, but not weaker. There was still steel in his spine, but it wasn't the kind meant to shield or dominate anymore. It was the kind that came from choosing to be vulnerable and surviving it. Daniel, standing beside him as best man, cleared his throat and offered a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. You ready for this? Ethan gave a short laugh. For the first time, yeah, I really am. Nina stood off to the side, dressed in a dusty rose gown that Clara had picked out with her at a thrift shop 3 weeks earlier. She held the rings in her open palm like they were fragile and sacred. Vanessa stood next to her, not out of obligation, but because she had chosen to. Because forgiveness, like love, was a decision made every single day. Clara's heart beat steadily as she stepped forward. Her mother's bracelet clinked softly around her wrist. She didn't carry flowers. She didn't wear a veil. Everything about this moment was stripped of pretense, honest, earned. When she reached Ethan, he reached out his hand, not to possess her, not to pull her into his world, but to walk beside her into something they'd built together. The officiant's voice was gentle, as if speaking too loudly might startle the peace. Clara Jensen, do you take Ethan Monroe, through storms and seasons, through fire and stillness, as your partner in every sense of the word? Clara laughed softly, not out of nervousness, but out of disbelief. Disbelief that she had made it here, that she had survived her past, that he had survived his. That two broken things could come together and not shatter further, but instead find strength in each other's cracks. I do, she whispered. The guests didn't clap, not yet. They just breathed with her, like they, too, were afraid this might be a dream. The officiant turned. And Ethan Monroe, do you take Clara Jensen without expectations, without conditions, as your partner in all things to come? Ethan's voice was low. Sure, I do. They exchanged rings. Simple bands, no diamonds, no gold-stamped monograms. Just metal. Just permanence. You may kiss the bride. He didn't rush. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, giving her space to choose. She didn't hesitate. When their lips met, the wind blew stronger through the trees, sending a flurry of leaves dancing around them like blessings whispered from the earth. Later, as the small reception hummed with quiet laughter, Ethan and Clara slipped away from the crowd. They found a wooden bench beneath a canopy of branches and sat side by side, their fingers linked like roots of the same tree. I still can't believe this happened, Clara said, gazing at the flickering candle someone had left nearby. Neither can I, Ethan replied, brushing a leaf from her shoulder. But I'd do it all again. Every headline, every vote, every sleepless night. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the light. Even the pasta you tried to cook that nearly set the kitchen on fire? He groaned. Especially that. She laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder. You know, it wasn't the wedding that made this real. No, it was the night I found you asleep on the couch with a spreadsheet on your chest and 3 empty mugs of tea beside you. I was working on the first housing application, he said. I didn't want to get it wrong. You didn't, she whispered. You got it right. They sat in silence, not because there was nothing to say, but because some moments needed space to live on their own. 3 weeks later, Clara stood before a room of donors at the Grace Initiative's new downtown location. The walls were still bare, the floors still smelled of fresh paint. But it was alive, full of stories and second chances waiting to happen. She wore a soft gray blazer, her hair in loose waves, and a pin on her lapel shaped like a rising phoenix, gifted by one of the women who'd completed their first job training program. I used to be afraid of being seen, Clara said, her voice steady. Because when you've lived in the shadows long enough, the light can feel like a threat. But someone believed I was worth seeing. Not because I was perfect, not because I was polished, but because I was enough. She scanned the room, finding Ethan in the back, arms crossed, eyes filled with quiet pride. So now, she continued, this building stands as a reminder that no story is too small, that no person is too lost, that healing is not a myth, it's a movement. Applause thundered through the room, but she didn't flinch. She smiled, grounded, real. That evening they returned home to the brownstone. Ethan kicked off his shoes and collapsed onto the couch, groaning. Remind me never to try networking in a room full of billionaires again. Clara laughed from the kitchen. Did someone offer you another yacht? Worse, he groaned. A partnership with a tech company that wants to disrupt homelessness with AI. Oh God. He peeked around the corner. I told them I'd pass. She threw him a cookie from across the room. He caught it. Barely. You've changed, Monroe, she said. He bit into the cookie. You make it easy. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Clara rested her head on Ethan's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. I had a dream once, she murmured, when I was still on the street, that someone found me, not saved me, just saw me, and I woke up crying because I thought it was too much to ask for. He ran his fingers through her hair, gentle. It wasn't. And now, she asked. He kissed her forehead. Now it's your turn to find others. Months passed, seasons turned. The Grace Initiative grew into a network. They opened shelters in other cities. Clara spoke at schools, at government hearings, at prison re-entry programs. Her story wasn't polished. It didn't have a Hollywood ending, but it was powerful because it was true. One morning, a letter arrived from someone named Talia. She had been 17 when she heard Clara speak, had just aged out of the foster system. No job, no support. You said something that day, the letter read. You said, your scars don't make you unworthy. They make you undeniable. I've repeated that to myself every day since. And last week, I got accepted into culinary school. Clara folded the letter carefully and placed it in a small wooden box, labeled Still Rising. That evening, she and Ethan walked hand in hand down a quiet street, their breath visible in the cool air. Did you ever imagine we'd end up here? She asked. No, he said honestly. But I also never imagined that the best thing I'd ever do with my life wouldn't involve money or buildings. She smiled. It involved me? No, he said, teasing. It involved listening to you. She bumped his shoulder. Close enough. As they turned the corner, a little girl passed them, skipping along the sidewalk with a pink scarf trailing behind her. She turned, looked at Clara and smiled without hesitation. No recognition, no judgment, just a smile. Clara smiled back. And in that quiet exchange, she saw something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not just peace, but permanence. She was no longer defined by where she had come from, nor chained to who the world once thought she was. She had rewritten the ending, and in doing so, she had written a beginning. Not just for herself, but for everyone still waiting for their door to open. Life lesson from the story. Sometimes, the most unexpected doors lead us to the people and places that change our lives forever. Clara's journey teaches us that where you start doesn't define where you can go. She was overlooked, forgotten, and cast aside. But through resilience, truth, and love, she transformed not only her life, but also the lives of those around her. This story is a powerful reminder that brokenness is not the end. It's often the beginning of something greater. When we stop trying to be perfect and start showing up as our true selves, we allow real connection to happen. We allow healing. We allow growth. Ethan's transformation is equally profound. He began as a man consumed by legacy and control, but he learned that the true legacy is not what we leave behind. It's how we lift others while we're still here. By choosing love over image, truth over convenience, and vulnerability over power, he became the kind of man his daughter could look up to, and the kind of partner Clara could trust. In the end, this wasn't a love story between a billionaire and a woman from the streets. It was a story about two people who met in a moment of chaos and chose to rise together, to fight for something real, to build a new kind of future. Now it's your turn. Where are you watching from? And have you ever experienced a moment that completely changed your path? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that touch the heart and remind us what truly matters in this life.